Hello everyone, Happy New Year, and welcome to the 7th round of my British Chess Championships. I was on 3.5 out of 6, so I was in the top half of the tournament, and I was actually upvoted to play a person who's about 2100, and they haven't really played much over the last 10 years or so, but they're having a very good tournament, winning against lots of strong opponents. So I was white. I decided that I would start off with c4, which is less known theoretically. He played e6, knight c3, d5. So I don't often like the lines with d4 and then dc, although I do know them to an extent. I'm sure it would have been fine, but I thought I could play a little bit unorthodox with playing e3 and then not playing d4. So knight f6, knight f3, b6, and here you can take on d5 to try and make black take with the pawn, so that when they play bishop b7 it will be blunted by their own pawn. But instead I played b3, developing my c1 bishop onto a different diagonal than the c1 to h6, because I've got two pawns in the way. We both do a fianchetto, and then knight bd7 is played, all very normal. And here, taking on d5 is considered slightly more theoretical. There's more written about this, and the point is that black either has to take with the knight, which gives white a slightly stronger centre, or they take with the pawn and blunt their bishop. But I thought bishop e2 would have given me time to castle. And bishop d6 is a bit unusual. Normally black plays bishop e7 here, so I tried to make use of that by taking and then forcing black's pawn to d5, and this odd little manoeuvre, knight to b5. The point of it is that when the bishop moves, to avoid losing the bishop pair, I can swing into d4, because in these types of positions, if my knight had stayed on c3, it often blocks in my bishop on d4, on a b2, sorry. But when it's on d4, it's a lot more flexible and is better centralized. Here I chose the wrong move, or the move that's a bit less accurate. I should apparently play rook c1 in the next move. After his c6, which is actually a very good move, surprisingly. It looks really strange, but the main point of it is to stop me playing knight c6 later on, with like rook c1, knight c6. And c5, though, is a bit less useful somehow because of knight f5, where the bishop has no squares to go to later on. So I castled, although rook c1's better. And then he played g6, which stops knight f5. So right now he hasn't put the bishop in the right place on e7, it should be g7, and is a bit less developed. I thought that rook c1 made sense to pressure the c-pawn, and he defended it. Then I played knight g5. I'm sure that you'll see this in a few seconds, but if he plays the move c5, which is a move to attack the knight, and it looks reasonable, what move does white have to get a winning position? I have knight e6, which will trap the black queen. I'll win a pawn and a queen 10 points for just two knights, 6 points. So 4 points ahead I should win. And he played castling, so the queen has e8. I therefore don't trap it. So f4 was my move. It felt very natural to attack the centre and the king side. And after his move c5, I decided to play a rather radical move here. Knight to b5, it does go after the a-pawn, but he can easily play a6, for example. Knight c2 is really passive, and knight f3 is clearly the best move. But I didn't like the fact that my knights are kind of tripping over each other a bit. And I want to play things like bishop f3 or rook f3 in the future. And knight e6 feels like I'm not getting enough, so I played this monstrosity, knight f5, to which he had been spending quite a long time on his moves, but suddenly for the next 20 moves or so, basically until the end, he was moving very, very quickly, so he didn't think very much of my sacrifice. he takes, and the point of it was bishop d3, so that now I've got both my bishops pointing at his king, my knight as well, and my queen and rook can quickly come in on the rook on f1, and the queen can start using the open files against the king. And it's very hard for black to use their pieces. The knight on f6 can't really do much, and knight on d7 can't really move. The bishop on e7 can't make itself useful yet, and the queen and the b7 bishop are both spectating the game. So I thought that even though I was a piece down for ostensibly nothing, black's inactivity and my activity against the weak king might have given me some compensation. The computer disagrees. It seems to give this as -2, so I basically got one pawn's worth of comp for a knight. The main point of it was, if black plays a move like knight to e4, which is clearly not that good, I can play things like queen h5, which, even though they just survive this, it's very difficult to play. And queen h6, and my rook can come in, rook h3, rook g3. Black's really struggling to survive. If the move knight to g4 or something, trying to stop me using my queen and rook over, I can actually play queen takes knight, pawn takes queen, and then bishop to h7 mate, using my 2 bishops and knight. So I was quite happy with my position right now. He played d4, which is clearly best because it blocks in the b2 bishop, and I took the pawn. Then here he played literally the only move which doesn't basically give equality, at least, to white. I was expecting that black might play a move like queen c7 possibly, or bishop d6, trying to get the queen to e7 and then activate. And here I thought I could take, even though I'm still a piece down. I've now got 2 pawns for it, and I was expecting a move like bishop c5, where he's trying to get rid of this bishop on d4, which is going for the king. But unexpectedly, I have this sacrifice, rook takes, and if rook takes, I even have moves like bishop c3. Black's really struggling here, like queen e7, I have queen h5. Again, the queen is immune because bishop takes h7 is mate. And again, I don't want to be black in this position. I'd much prefer to be white, with a lot of initiative. But he played an excellent move, which is the best. He did h6. And I then realised that if I take the pawn, I don't quite get enough. He can actually take the knight, even though it looks immensely dubious. What will eventually happen is that, surprisingly, he even has moves like rook e8, but he can also simply give the piece back, and maybe even give me the exchange. Actually, sorry, in this position. So yeah, you take here first, then take on c1. So I would have to either take him, or grab the knight, and then he could take the rook. And if I take the bishop, he takes my queen, and I don't quite have enough. Actually, no, I do have enough here, because queen g4 works. So maybe he would have to take with knight takes f6 and lose the exchange. But the computer after the game said that black always has some resource here. Maybe even moves like pawn g4 might be okay for black, simply stopping me putting my queen out. And also black doesn't have to take my knight. They also have c takes d, which actually looks a lot easier now that I think about it. Then if I play bishop takes, they can probably do rook takes first, and this is the key point, then bishop c5, and I can't sack the exchange to keep my bishop on d4. I don't think I'll have enough. But, a couple of pawns for the piece is at least giving me chances later on. In the game, I played a lot more rashly with knight h7, and he took me instantly, so I got queen g4, and I realised that my idea was that if bishop takes knight, I thought that he couldn't play the move he did because of discovered checks, but I'm essentially one move too slow. He has rook g8, then he's threatening rook takes g2 check, which will be completely winning. So regrettably, I had to take the rooks off the board in exchange for my queen. So now I'm a knight and a queen down for 2 rooks. And he played expertly, knowing exactly what to do, trading enough pieces to make his knight and queen valuable. They team up really well, knights and queens. Here I probably should play rook takes e3 for piece activity rather than trying to keep material. But I knew I was lost anyway, so I thought the best chance was to go for the material. And his knight is excellent on e4. His move might be f5 next to cement the knight. So I played f5 myself, hoping to kick the knight out at some point. But I don't have enough time to evict it due to my weak king. So here I was hoping for a few pawns of mine to actually drop, and then I can use the open files for my rooks. And c4, he's opening the files but getting a dangerous passed pawn. I swing over to play some checks. He keeps pushing. And then essentially my only trick at the game is to play rook b1 to b7 checkmate. But he sees it, and then after c2 I took one more pawn so that the material is actually about equal. And then here I can't do anything. The c-pawn will queen and I will lose, so I resigned in this position. So overall my sacrifice was interesting, but it didn't work, and he played all the right moves to prove that my sacrifice didn't work. So that means that with the loss I'm now on 50%, 3.5 out of 7, and on the 2nd of January 2021, which is tomorrow, I'll be playing a young player who is, I would say, about 300 or maybe 400 points lower rated than she should be. I think she should be more like 2000, 2100 level. So that would still give me a chance to win, though, because I think of myself as a bit stronger than that. But that'll be an interesting game to cover on these videos. So thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.